Good evening, everyone. A more formal welcome. Thank you for joining us here at Greenwich House Pottery. You're probably all over the country and perhaps all over the world, so we really are thankful that you're here with us today. My name is Fabio Fernandez. I'm the director of Greenwich House Pottery, an organization that was founded in 1908 to offer ceramics classes and workshops to the greater Greenwich Village community. It sprouted out of Greenwich House, which was a settlement house, with a mission to offer arts and culture, but then also social services and health services to recent immigrants and the community at large. So I'm really fortunate, along with my colleagues, to work at an arts organization that's within a larger social services organization that's very much in line with my particular values. Um, and we have a very talented group of people here on staff and on faculty. We have three main program areas: our classes and workshops, which attract about 250 students any given semester, and they range in age from 9 years old to 99 years old. And we offer classes in slip casting, hand building, and wheel throwing. Our second program is an exhibition gallery, where Caitlin curates 3 exhibitions a year. And the program that we're here to focus on and discuss today is our artist residency program. It's very competitive. We get applications from all over the country, and we're able to offer a few people the time and space to realize their work, up to 2 months, and they can be people that are very well grounded in ceramics, or they can be artists that have very little exposure to ceramics. We offer them the technical help, the materials, the advice, and the platform. And so we're here today. We're about to learn a little bit more about Kelly Chang and his work, but I'll turn it over to my colleague, Caitlin McClure, who's not only the curator, but also the residency program manager, and she will introduce Kelly. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin McClure, the gallery and residency manager. Sorry, my dog Pickles has decided that he would like to say hello to everyone also. So just a few kind of Zoom etiquette points before we get started. If everyone can please stay on mute until the end when we do a Q&A session. If you have any questions as Kelly is speaking and you're really worried you're going to forget them, go ahead and chat them and I'll read them out at the end to make sure that you get all your questions answered. But so without any further ado, I'm going to give you a short bio on Kelly, who has been a true pleasure to have with us at Greenwich House Pottery during his residency. And then Kelly will take it from there. So Kelly Chang is a New York-based art director, animator, and designer who is developing his art practice in clay. Kelly earned his BA in art history from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and studied computer science at New York University. He was the director of visual effects at FX Networks, as well as a lead computer graphics artist for Oscar and BAFTA-winning creative studio Framestore, and a sculpture production assistant to the artist Matthew Barney. He is currently a board member at Blackball Projects, a gallery and arts nonprofit based in Brooklyn, New York. His work has been shown at MoMA PS1. Without any further ado, Kelly, please take it away. Tell us all about your work and your residency.
Yay. Great to be here. So grateful and thankful and honored to be here at the residency, and also just in this talk where I get to see all these wonderful people, people I know, people I've met, people I haven't met. Fantastic. And so I just want to go over a little bit of my background. I have pretty diverse sort of educational background and training and professional background. As Caitlin mentioned, I studied art history in college, but also I was always interested in design. I was always interested in art practice. I have a little bit of formal training in photography and sculpture and drawing, painting. But really, out of college, I really went into, I wanted to be an industrial designer. I didn't study industrial design, but I studied art history, oddly enough, and my focus was design. My focus was history of design, um, early modern art. I'll get into that a little bit later, but early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work at MoMA as an intern, research intern at MoMA in New York. And it was there I met a woman named Chelsea Ramiresa, who was also working at MoMA, but she was the line producer for Matthew Barney at the time, and he was really all the rage. I gave this talk to Olga earlier today, but I realized it sounds very similar, but I'm going to go quite a different direction today with this talk. So I ended up ultimately working in computer graphics. After a little bit of dabbling in the art world, I had an opportunity to work with some friends in San Francisco at an animation company where they were doing computer animation. And this was at a time where computer animation was not very easy to do on your own. You couldn't just buy a computer and software at home. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this kind of stuff. And my friends just happened to be a couple of young dudes who were doing some free work for these companies that were making the equipment and software. My friend Ben Fischler, who I went to high school with, he and a couple of his partners started a little animation company in San Francisco. And I ran into him one winter, and he said, you know, I asked him if I could come out and learn how to do computer animation. And he said, yeah, you know, you can sleep on my floor and come learn stuff, which I did. And over pretty short amount of time, I was working in commercials and feature animation in San Francisco. And I really got like a very, very intense immersive training doing that stuff. I eventually moved back to New York and worked in both commercials and industrial design. And the connection there is the 3D software. I was using a 3D software called Alias at the time, which was made by a company called Alias Wavefront. And it was also later purchased by a company called Autodesk, which is a really big software company that makes 3D software and construction and engineering software. But I picked up those skills and was able to work in both design and in entertainment, animation, commercials, motion design, etc. And I really, my professional career really launched from that point. And I was really lucky. I think I was able to pick up work at all kinds of places in areas that were super fun and exciting. And, as a young person, were pretty well paying as well. I was really lucky. And I sort of bounced around different places. I was a freelancer and an independent contractor. And I did end up working at a company called Frame Store in New York, which is quite a large visual effects studio based in London. They've been around for many years, and from the earliest computer animation films to Marvel movies now, the Avengers movies, Doctor Strange, etc. All the Harry Potter movies, I believe they had a role on most of the Harry Potter movies. I worked in their commercials office in New York and also in the films department. And then at some point I moved to LA a few years ago. 2014. I moved to LA, and I thought I was just going to have a little change of pace out there. And I was offered a job at FX Networks from my former intern and roommate, Diana Suarez, who was an SVA student early on in the sort of 2000s, 05, 06, 07. She had moved to LA and called me when I got there and said, hey, do you want a job at FX Networks? They're hiring a director level person at this internal design group. And I was there for 4.5 years. And it was a pretty awesome experience. There was essentially what was being built there was a really specialized internal design group where normally they would hire out vendors from fancy design studios who charge a lot of money, and they may or may not have gotten what they wanted, but always spent a lot of money. And I think internally they ended up investing in this kind of what was called by some, and not ironically, the dream team. I remember the head of the network called us that in the lobby once, and he was not being facetious one bit. He's like, you guys are, you know, we hired you as experts from every corner. And it was a really, really great opportunity because we got to do a lot of really interesting things, not just with computer animation and visual effects, but we used 3D printers. We built practical models. We were on film sets, had film shoots, mixed and matched different media, digital, practical, and I think I owe a lot to that group and my colleagues there, and the people who ran the department and had faith in this group to do all this cool stuff. And I think it really paid off for everybody. In 2018, I left that company because I just kind of needed a break and a change of pace, and I wanted to spend more time with family and friends and travel a bit because I'd just been working for so long. So I think I traveled for like a year. I lived out of a van. I went to Japan. I rode my mountain bike all over the country. At some point I had the idea to start a 3D scanning business where I would just be a really specialized service bureau for film and entertainment, maybe video games. And I bought a bunch of equipment. I got some shared office space prepped, and then we had a global pandemic. Something that I don't think I could have predicted. I did one job before the pandemic, February 2020, and I did 1 day's worth of work in February 2020, and then all the production in Hollywood shut down, and I came to New York, take care of my parents. Yeah, and I just want to show you some things, including a little short reel I made. It's sort of a quick cut down reel of some commercial work I've done in the past. It's really kind of a bit of a rough thing, but it's mostly the computer animation I did before ceramics. And I'm going to get into the ceramics and art practice after this. So I'm going to share this real quick, and it's about a minute. It's short. Olga, it's shorter than what your class saw. So, so that's just sort of like a little sampling of some computer graphics projects I've done over somewhat recent years. Maybe that represents things over the last 10 years or so. Again, I haven't done a lot of that kind of stuff in the last 2 or 3 years, but do little tests and things here and there. And the interesting thing is I use the tools and software now in ceramics practice. So I just want to talk about getting into the ceramics practice and what, sort of the prompting of that transition. I was in New York during this pandemic, and there was nothing to do, and it just nothing normal you could do. And at some point, I had I think I kept walking by Greenwich House because I know the block very well. One of my best friends growing up grew up on this block on Jones Street, and I had never taken a class there. I'd never really gone in. Actually, I went in once for an opening. I believe my friend Jessica Stoller, who's a faculty member, was part of a group show, and I'd been there once, and I think about 2010, 11, 9, 2010, something like that. And I'd been in there once, and I was really curious about classes and ceramics, but never really took a class. And then during the pandemic, I kept checking for classes, and lo and behold, they were opening at partial capacity, I think half capacity, and it was masks on, sanitized 3 times a day, social distance, 2 tables widths per person. It was pretty elaborate, but I was super paranoid as well. So I thought, oh, this is a place where people wear masks anyway because of the clay dust, and there's no good reason not to. And so I looked for a class, and I actually wanted to take the wheel class, but it was full. And I looked up the slip casting class, which sounded really interesting. And it was slip casting and mold making with Andrew Robinson. And he's been, so I took a class with him, and I keep running into Andrew here, and we keep trying to figure out when it was that I started ceramics. And I looked back, and the first class was February 17th this year, 2021. And so I've been doing ceramics now for about 10 months, if that, a little under 9 months and change. And I really immersed myself in it. And Andrew, some of the things I did in the class was to make these little objects that I 3D printed and make molds of them and cast them. And I'm going to show you a couple of those things right now. Can you all see this? Yeah. Okay. So I had this sort of ongoing concept in my mind about it was a really sort of fatalistic. So many things in this world didn't just seem to be going right. Like environmentally, sustainability, et cetera, politics, pandemics, notwithstanding. And I had this joke with my ex. We were always talking about, oh, remember Earth 1? That was so nice. Remember Earth? That was so cool, like trees and the ocean and stuff like that. Oh man, Earth 2 doesn't really have that stuff. And we would joke, and I had this idea in my head about souvenirs from Earth 1 for a civilization that doesn't live on Earth anymore. For whatever reason, fast forward 1,000 years. And I thought, oh, it'd be really cool to, have like, what would a cheesy gift shop on Earth 2 look like? And you could get like a bogus sample of the ocean in a ceramic tile that would survive, because ceramics being so permanent, being able to survive temperature and age and time. Like what a great material for a souvenir. And you know, so this series was sort of called Souvenirs from Earth One. And this little tile, you know, aside from being part of that inside joke, was really an excellent test for doing little flip casting things. And so, you know, I kind of made a series of these. I glazed them in different colors. And they're just really nice little objects. They're pretty small. They're about 3 inches wide. And, you know, they really shrink. I didn't know that. They shrink. So they were originally about 4 inches, and then they shrank to about 3 inches, and they're like a little coaster. But people really like them. I gave them out, and I sold some. You know, Andrew was really impressed by the ideas and the, you know, the ability to print stuff. And he said, "Oh, you should apply for the residency, because I think they'd be really into, you know, the technology you're using and ceramics." And yeah, here's some more souvenirs from Earth One. Telephones, cell phones. This is an old landline kind of phone, but preserved in ceramic, glazed, you know, electronics, potentially trash, e-waste, etc., recycle bin. So Andrew said, apply for the residency, and he told me this, and I looked it up, and it was due like that week. And so I kind of, you know, I kind of hustled and got some things together. I didn't think I would get it. And then lo and behold, Caitlin called me at some point, I don't remember when, and said, "Hey, are you, you know, you're kind of in the running. Would you want to have another talk about it?" And I was super thrilled, and still wasn't sure if I was getting it. And then a few months later, I think the final decision was made, and I was absolutely over the moon to be able to do this residency. And totally awesome. I mean, it just had, you know, reshaped what was becoming a really shapeless year, I think, for everybody. And I'm so grateful that A, the school is open, and B, that they're continuing the programs and the residency, because I'm not sure what I would have done. So here's some other things as well. And so these are, just so you know, they're simulated oceans. They're simulated in the computer. You know, they're not real. They're not from photographs. They're not made by any real physical analog means. They're surfaces that are created in the computer with some math functions that really are very close to what waves are made of. You know, waves are just repetitive patterns of energy, maybe that interfere and overlap. And, you know, this is very easy to do in the computer. And I made a bunch of these sort of ocean surface models in the computer, made little tiles, and they're, you know, nice little objects. And these were some glazed tests and different colors of tiles. This is my dog. And this is also I made in that first class. I 3D scanned my dog. I happened to have a 3D scanner that I'd purchased for my business, which never really took off. And I 3D scanned my dog when she was sleeping, and I made a mold for it in Andrew's class. And this turned out really great. And there was a tiny version of this, I think, in the gallery show. It was that white chino that turns like a burnt cheese color. And they call it the cheese dog. So this one turned out more of a denim-y blue, which is great. And this is I gave it to my friend in Switzerland. Bruno, if you're on the call, this is your bookshelf, and that's where it is. So you know, this sort of planted the seed for a lot of things in my mind to do, and especially for the residency, you know, like just an expansion on it. I wanted to pursue a little bit more in depth the process and some of the techniques of, you know, 3D scanning, 3D printing, while also, you know, incorporating and honoring ceramics as a practice. And but knowing that I'm, you know, a beginner, and knowing that I'm not going to be necessarily sculpting and rendering some wonderful thing, but making full use of these techniques that I bring to the table from my background. And, you know, just so many ideas just sprung forth from that. And, you know, one of those ideas was really to, one moment, where's that slide? Oh, here's some other trash. Can you see that? okay. These are tiny coffee cups. These are more tests, tiny coffee cups that are made of porcelain. And I wasn't really sure, but this was just sort of trashy stuff, and fit in with the whole theme of trash and discarded things, but really cute little tiny things that one point I wasn't sure what I was going to do, maybe sell them, maybe what. I still have a pile of them that are going to be released into the wild at some point. So into the residency, I had a lot of ideas, but one of the ideas was really to, I want to skip ahead a little bit to, you know, what I had initially proposed. I'd done a trip to the Met and looked into Ming porcelain and Chinese porcelain in general, not specifically Ming, but also the history of the Ming porcelain is really interesting as this commodity and fetishized object value, especially in Europe and outside of China. You know, there's a whole fascinating history of trade and cultural exchange and the shaping of ceramics and ceramics industry in China because of, you know, this one particular period, which is quite a long period of ceramics being introduced and popularized in the West. And I did a trip to the Met and looked at all this stuff with relief on it. These are from a book. It's not at the Met, but there's quite a bit of stuff. So I thought, you know, with some of my background and some of the projects I'd done, I want to do some kind of interpretation of Chinese ceramics and incorporate into that some contemporary themes, contemporary decorative themes, maybe some 3D scans, some photography, you know, create a narrative, reinterpret and sort of translate. I am a Chinese American. I was born in New York City. I did not have a traditional Chinese upbringing. My parents did come from China at some point, but grew up in Hong Kong and Taiwan respectively, and came here as young people. And my parents were really not traditional parents, a little bit rebellious, and definitely, you know, we had very few traditions growing up. And my father was in the restaurant business in New York, and I was always surrounded by all kinds of Chinese pottery in the weirdest context. You know, the very cheap to very expensive, to things made of plastic, screen printed, to restaurant ware and all kinds of themes. And I just remember being surrounded by these decorative themes and didn't know what to make of anything. And, you know, I sort of lumped it all together in my mind. Visually, it's Chinese ceramics. And I think maybe a lot of Westerners might feel the same way. They're like, oh, that's just Chinese ceramics. You know, you sit down in a restaurant and it's hard to tell if you're eating off of a $20,000 plate because it looks just like a $20,000 plate. And it's made just like a $20,000 plate. You know, it's made of porcelain, maybe by hand, maybe hand carved, maybe hand painted. And it was just so fascinating to me. And I wanted to do something with this concept in the residency. And so I followed this path. Oh, here are some things that are in my parents' home. This is a carved lacquer lamp. I think it's plastic. It's not necessary. I think it's hard to tell if it's plastic, it's expensive, if it's cheap. This thing looks like like a Shang Dynasty bronze urn. It's an ice bucket. This is a plastic liner. It's got a green plastic liner. You put ice cubes in it for your party. And I don't know where it came from, but it looks pretty nice. And it's not. It smells bad. It's from the 60s. But it is bronze and the inside's plastic. Again, carved lacquer or plastic, I'm not sure. Screen printed, hand painted. I think this is screen printed. This is an actual antique that's falling apart. Mother of pearl inlay, hand painted, Chinese antique, maybe really valuable, but treated terribly, falling apart. You know, it's kind of junky, which is sad. And just sort of taking this sort of visual memory and influence from family just growing up, I kind of conceived of this series I wanted to do of these vessels. And so let me see. I got going a bunch of, I'm going to totally skip around. I got into my head the idea to 3D scan people, and while I was in the residency, to get people to pose for me. This is my friend Melissa in California, who actually posed for me a couple of years ago, but this is a nice picture that I was able to take of the process. You know, I zap you with a laser. Caitlin had this done to her. I apologize if you were blinded, but you know, you end up getting what's called a point cloud, and let me turn the volume off, but you can see, you know, there's like a live preview of this point cloud that's being generated. And I think she smiles at some point. Let's see that smile. Yay. Okay. You end up getting a 3D model out of it, you know, and quite a nice 3D model that looks just like the person. And it's a 3D photograph. It's and relatively quickly captured, you know, and I think this is a technology that wasn't very common 10 years ago, you know, let alone more than that. So this is my friend Mike, and you know, we got a scan of him that day as well. But so I've used this process here at Greenwich House. I had a bunch of volunteer models to model for me, and then the idea was really to get them into the computer and to use them. This arm belongs to Taylor Stone, who is a tech here at Greenwich House. She has some lovely tattoos, and I did some 3D scanning of her with photography in a process called photogrammetry, where still photographs are combined to make a 3D model. And this is Isolina. She's a tech here as well, and she posed for me, and I was able to get a 3D model of her. And, you know, among other people. This is I believe Cindy, who's an NYU student and a student at Greenwich House. Those little green floating things in the air represent every camera angle I took a picture of her at. And the computer just sort of reverse engineers the 3D model subject from photographs taken from all these angles. And the more angles, the better. And actually, this was a video I took, but it's interpolated into individual photos taken from all those angles, just so you get an idea of how the technology works. There's Taylor's wonderful tattoo arm with the eye on it. So cool. And I thought I'm definitely going to use that somewhere. There's Caitlin being a good sport again, and I'm doing the same process with her, but I'm doing the walk around video, getting some parallax from different angles. And we also did some traditional 3D scans with her with the scanner, and got this, one time got this weird two-headed Caitlin, which is you know, it's part of the danger of the scanning process. You get some odd artifacts sometimes where it doesn't align the images properly. And we got a Siamese conjoined Caitlin and friend. But you end up with a 3D model, and then that 3D model can be applied as low relief. And I have this sort of test I did on a cylinder. And the idea was to get these low relief images from contemporary life and pandemic specifically, people masked, people on phones, you know, just sort of like a scene, a life scene as depicted on pottery might be. And to have that appear on these vessels. And I really, as I set up to do more and more scanning, there was you know, I was several weeks into the residency where I was just doing a lot of scanning, and I came upon a bunch of objects, again, from my home that I scanned, and I thought, oh, this is really the project that I need to finish here. This vessel series, I think, you know, I really got a lot of material collected for it, but I think the final forms still had something to be worked out, and I had a few in process. And but what really excited me was the other ceramic objects I scanned, including including some idols and deities and all these other Chinese symbols. This is the Buddha holding a gold tail or ingot. This is a Chinese wealth god. Again, the same wealth god as a ceramic object. A god, a longevity god, and Chinese culture involves all kinds of deities from all kinds of places, historical figures, even Hindu gods, Buddhist symbols, Taoist. I can't call them characters or deities because some of them are based on mythical figures, some of them are based on historical figures. Sometimes those figures are combined into one entity and represented a certain way. And as the idea of religion and spirituality is a bit blurry and fuzzy in Chinese culture, and it's sort of blended in with what Chinese culture is. And there's no, in any particular household, those traditions are sort of blended and different, expressed differently, and continue to maybe evolve a little bit. In my parents' home, there were always these kinds of things, and next to it is the lucky cat, which is a Japanese symbol for good fortune and welcoming luck, and often seen in shops and businesses. And this is I believe, a prosperity, fertility, prosperity kind of a god, but the idea of getting rich and living long and being prosperous and having children and all these like good luck omens and things are very, very common in Chinese culture. So I had this idea to combine all these things, and as a sort of representation of my tie to that culture without having a really specific traditional upbringing. And it sort of speaks to cultural identity, which is a real hot topic as well. And especially in this time, and I think it's over the last year or two, just come to the forefront of so many cultural, social discussions of what what it means to be an American. And sorry, hold on. And I have that as well. It's like, well, I have all these experiences, and I've discussed this so many times with people about what it is to be an American, but not to look, to look like this, but to be a native-born, native English speaker. I don't speak Chinese. I mean, of any dialect. I am, or pretty bad at it anyway. I did not grow up speaking fluently in any Chinese dialect. English is my primary language. I grew up in New York. No formal training in any kind of, Chinese language other than in university level, where I took some art history classes. I took a Chinese language, like an intro class. But I'm an American, and I like to quote. I saw a documentary about Maya Lin. Caitlin, it's 5:42. Did you chat me? No.
No, I didn't. I was going to give you until 5:45, and then I was going to interrupt you.
All right. So I'm feeling pretty good though, and so I like to quote Maya Lin. I saw a documentary about Maya Lin, I think in college, and it was after she'd done the Vietnam War memorial wall, and I think maybe like a 60 minutes interview. The interviewer asked her, how Chinese are you and how American are you? And she said, I'm as Chinese as apple pie, which I think is really funny because she, I think the cultural identity, I think also is like, for her, it was a sort of irrelevant, and I think just being challenged like that, it's sort of like, the question, is the problem. And so I like to quote her, like, I'm as Chinese as apple pie. And, sometimes I feel like that. And sometimes I feel way more Chinese than apple pie. And maybe I feel as Chinese as Chewbacca or the Disney princess. So, just to get into my piece a little further, I ended up 3D scanning a bunch of these figures. And so I sort of put a pin in the vessel series, and which I'm going to continue, but I continued on full force with this these ceramic figures, and I 3D scanned them. You can see they're different sizes, and you know, I wanted again to incorporate ceramic objects, you know, and reinterpret ceramic objects in ceramics as sort of a cultural translation, if you will. I hope that sums it up and makes some sense to people. And I ended up combining all these statues and figures into one piece. And this is the computer sort of wireframe of what that looks like. And ideally, the way the finished piece looks. And I felt, you know, when I got to this point, I was like, ah, that's it. That's it. Now I just gotta physically make the thing in ceramics. So that, and then, you know, thus began the arduous process of mold making and printing and all that business. And so the last few weeks, I've really been jamming on that. And here's my paper mock-up to figure out the scale, just a paper bag stuffed with other paper bags. And I was able to work out the scale. I printed out sections of it in plastic, which, you know, my printer isn't that big. So I had to print out parts and combine them and glue them together. They've got some pretty grotesque seams in them. And piece by piece, I kind of put stuff together and ended up with these larger parts, some smaller parts. There's the 3D printer. Here's some of my molds for the smaller parts, including the Chewbacca arm, the gold ingots. Pretty proud of these molds. And this is a time-lapse video of the printer going, I believe, on, I want to say it's the Little Mermaid. But this is a time-lapse over, I want to say this is like 10 and 12 hours worth of printing overnight. And I think at the end I cut it off, but you can see the house lights go on when the studio opens. So here's some other parts of it printed in plastic, and other parts printed in plastic in pieces. They got some ugly seams, but I was able to smooth them over. And here I am making my molds. It's quite an involved process.
I'm interrupting to tell you that it's 5:45.
Fantastic, thank you, Caitlin. Here's the mold making process. I'm making some, this is the biggest one. And if anybody knows about the process, you know, you set up some coddles, you fill in gaps, you soap the thing, you pour in some plaster. I was talking to Fabio earlier about how I used 200 pounds of plaster. They gave me 200 pounds at the beginning of the residency. I used 150 last week. And thus the workout and the sore muscles. And trips up and down the stairs a little bit, not too many. Here are the pieces coming out of the molds. Here's the molds sort of coming together. And there's the big guy, 75-pound molds with about 50 pounds of slip in it. There's the Little Mermaid. There's my beautiful, well-trimmed, shaved molds. I want to make Andy and Andrew proud, my instructors in mold making. I hope I did a good job. I forgot to make keys, if that means anything to anybody. Here I'm improvising because I ran out of banding straps. Totally worked. Here's some, this is what they look, the pieces come out of, the plastic pieces once they're all wrecked and dried and basically broken because I had to pull them out. And then here are my finished molds. I made 17 mold pieces for this piece. That's pouring plaster 17 times and letting it cure and dry and all that stuff. I'll play that again, just so you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a bunch of coffee cups in the back. Anyway, so I hope that's given a good idea of like what I've done during the residency for this. That's sort of the bigger project. I have a couple of things in, you know, in the works. I did some experiments with some other materials, including 3D printed resin, and which looks like this. We can talk more about that if you have questions about it. It's a 3D printed clay material. It's very difficult to work with. It was hard to make anything of size. come out of it, but I'm still experimenting with it. I think that's sort of just like running down my project and the process in general. I think I'm going to open up to questions now, if anybody has. Any questions in the chats?
No questions in the chats yet.
More of a comment than a question. It's just been amazing to see you interact with our community. And I know that you've also had students from Parsons and from NYU come and see what you're doing. And it's so exciting because we don't offer 3D printing as a class here, but there was such great interest in what you're doing. And there's some people who don't care at all about 3D printing in any material, but the fact that you're doing it in ceramics, I think, is a little bit of a teaser and does have some excitement within the community. So thank you, Kelly.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. And I think the community here has been. I mean, it's hard to say enough about it because it's the residency and just being part of Greenwich House has been sort of life-changing for me, and I'm so all in to claim it's all I ever talk about. I sound like some kind of a cult member, and there are other people who feel that way too. And like you said, Caitlin, people come from all walks of life here, and we don't really know what people do outside of this place, but they do a lot of cool stuff, and they all meet here together and individually have some kind of clay practice that is their passion. And it's so interesting. There's a lot of artists, there's designers, there are scholars and historians, or people who don't do anything with their hands or artistically or creatively outside of this place. And this is their little oasis for people. And I've really talked to everybody here and met so many people, students and faculty, I think in a way that students and faculty and staff don't really get to have. And I think I'm really lucky because I'm the one who's here all the time and I get to interact with everybody. And it's been a real blessing and really, really a great learning experience. And just the staff hanging out, like I get tips and tricks and advice, and it's been so awesome. Okay, I have some questions. Barbara asks, what are your glazing plans for the big mold? And then in conjunction with that, can we see the final piece, even just as a mock-up? So I'm gonna reveal where the final piece is. It's right behind me. And I'm gonna try to stay plugged in with the wire. Hold on. Okay, I did this for a little bit earlier. I practiced. So this is the cast piece. I was able to get it out of the mold, and this is 2 sections of it. This is the slip cast porcelain. It's currently what we call green. It's leather hard green. The big piece came out of the mold really well. The medium-sized piece came out of the mold really well. I've got some small pieces in my wet box that also came out really well. I am still waiting for a successful Little Mermaid, but this is a little Chewbacca arm. And hang on, this goes here, if you can see that. And he's just waving to everybody. So that's the big piece. And again, the mock-up, which is all wrecked now because it had to come out of the mold making process. That's sort of the molds. That's the positive, the plastic 3D printed positive. So pretty excited about this. The glazing process, I've done some test tiles. And speaking of test tiles, this is Caitlin's 3D print cast in porcelain. And these were my test tiles. I made a bunch of these just to see how glaze would fire. And I used some underglaze, testing different colors and to see what the clear looked like and if it would come out pure white, what glaze running would look like on relief. the plan for this guy is really to go pretty white and try to keep a uniform surface. I think I'm going to do a underglaze spray gradient from the bottom, and also give some accent to the peach. I think the peach needs to have just that little rosy blush on it, and maybe the big bald head on the longevity god. Let's see, can we see the final piece? Yes, yes. What other questions? Susan asks, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Would love to hear a little more about that last piece you showed, the one that looked like multiple pipes stuck together. I wonder if that is this piece, Susan.
Yes, that's the one.
Okay,
I
great.
think.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a, this is the one that was 3D printed in ceramic resin. And this is, I made this in the computer. It's very similar to like a honeycomb or cellular structure and extruded, in this dimension. And this is again, like I said, this is made from a ceramic porcelain material. This was fired at cone 10, if that means anything to you. In the reduction firing, that's sort of the big gas firing at Greenwich House, which is sort of a, it's one of the special things that is at Greenwich House, is a sort of big gas kilns, which you can't just, put in any studio. You kind of, Greenwich House is
Right.
100-something years old and has sort of, all the permitting and stuff grandfathered in, I believe. And so this turned black in the reduction firing, where the kiln is starved of air and oxygen, and I believe the minerals and components of the clay come out or drawn from the clay, and the chemical reaction causes all kinds of wonderful effects in glazes, but also just in this porcelain product, whatever was in here came out and went black, which I think is really cool looking. Yeah, did I, yeah, okay. I hope that answers a little bit of that question. Yeah. Joni Ellen asks, wait, I'm sorry. What's going on? It just came out. Wonderful. Joni Ellen says, it makes so much sense that you're making futuristic artifacts out of clay and a Chinese apple pie Rushmore. Yes, Joni. Joni, by the way, is a good friend and colleague who is also an artist. She is a sculptor and video maker. And I got to give some credit to Joni because she did her MFA at Cal State Long Beach, which has an amazing ceramics facility, but her concentration was in wood. And of course, Joni is the one who chooses the wood concentration and uses 3D scanning and CNC machine milling and video art and performance to do her wood piece. And I was blown away by the facilities they had at Long Beach and how Joni was able to use these in her work. And she has some wonderful pieces, large pieces. She does also some cast plastic stuff and videos and performance, but really it was Joni's working, I worked with her a little bit. I helped to assist her on some of her large installations just as the muscle. And I just thought it was so cool, like this, and just talking about it with her and talking about her projects with her, in regards to the using 3D scanning and in 3D work, sculpture work, as sort of like photography and as a 3-dimensional collage. And again, not hand working the piece, even though everything gets hand worked at some point, but her work is 3D scans of her human body and furniture and things merged together. It's really something. And so if anyone wants to check out Joni Ellen. And she's still continuing to make some really cool stuff. Question about life from Pablo. What gave you the courage to leave your stable special effects career and start a new pathway in art? Man, that is a good question. And I think the students kind of asked me that this morning. And I don't know if it's courage or just recklessness and a general distrust for the state of high capitalism in this world. But I think that being, of a certain age and experience doing commercial work, I think I really, at a certain point in life, just needed more than a mortgage and being overworked. And I don't know, it's like it doesn't really, I could really talk a long time about this, about life choices, but I think really the answer is I've always wanted to do this, and I've always wanted to pursue the creative practice. And there's no time like the present when you're in a global pandemic and you're well into middle age.
Kelly, I think I've got a question
we're
that
getting
went to
there.
me instead
Okay,
of to you.
Go ahead.
So Laurel asked, thanks for featuring Kelly today. Great example of someone that lets curiosity lead the process. Kelly, are you mainly interested in symbol rather than function?
Symbol rather than function. Well, I think in the sculptural work, sure. But if this is like a ceramics question about functional ceramics versus conceptual sculpture and ceramics, then my ceramics interests are pretty broad. I actually throw on the wheel, and that's my secret ceramics hobby. On Thursday night, I threw on the wheel at the ceramic studio in the co-op building where I live. And I don't know if Danielle Pomorski is on this call, but she is the studio manager at the that studio. Big props to Danielle, and also to Michelle Courier, who teaches at Greenwich House, for teaching me how to use a wheel. I love it. And I love making cups and bowls. And I have about 40 vases in my bedroom waiting to go to somebody. I hope that answers that question. I'm not sure, but yeah. Any other questions? We're getting there. I think it's right about 6.
Yeah, we're a little bit over, but I'm at least going to ask this one more question because I think it's a good question. So Pablo asks, what is the most challenging thing in your current process that you are the most excited about?
I think that what I'm being able to do right now is to fully explore a concept, an idea, and fully execute and arrive at this sort of art choice process where, and I'm not sure if I've ever had that, where I can sort of like collect the sort of influence and interest and create something and go through that whole process from conception to, arriving at something and having this, aha, that's it, and then like do it, finish it. And you got something from start to finish. I think just from a creative process, that's something I've never really had before. And I think that this is, this is it. It's exciting. I wanted to make sorry to do this, but I wanted to show this piece that I made that that was related to I skipped over it because I was worried about time. And I know that we're a minute over or two, but this was a continuation. This is another piece I made during residency that actually I was able to sell a bunch of at this fundraiser for the nonprofit that I am a part of. And this is another sort of a souvenir piece. And this is slip cast porcelain that's black. It's dyed, and thanks to Taylor Stone and Andy Graves, who gave me some advice about dyeing porcelain. But I just want to show you this process of the smooth plastic, the molding, and then the black porcelain, which I think super nice. I really enjoy these pieces. And these are some of the I've actually sold artwork, which I'm really excited about. And it was made during this residency, and I'm so thrilled. And that that's part of our the Black Belt Projects fundraiser. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me about the nonprofit, that's plenty to talk about there. Yeah. Thank Anna Wolovic plugging away. That she's my co-chair Good work, Anna. We're in fundraising season, as is Greenwich House in fundraising season. So certainly a cause worth looking into. And I am forever grateful. Like, it's such an amazing institution. And somebody described it as, oh my God, I don't know. There was something. It's really an institution, and it's beloved. I think somebody described it as that. I think Cara Jean. It's like, this is a beloved place.
Well, that's a great transition for me to plug the sidewalk sale this weekend.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if we're not rained out, this Saturday, December 11th from 11 to 4, we're going to be selling a lot of ceramics on the sidewalk, 16th Jones Street. Everyone should come. If it rains on Saturday, we'll probably do it on Sunday instead, but we'll post it on our Instagram in case anyone wants to come to that. People asked some really good questions in the chat. I definitely want to call out one before we go. I can't find it now, but someone asked if Kelly will be showing his work at all from the residency. And the answer is yes. Next summer, July 2022, we'll have a group show of all the resident artists from 2021. And so Kelly's work will be in that. So mark your calendars for July 2022 and you'll get to see more of Kelly's work in person. It is 6:05. What do we think, folks? Do we need to wrap it up? Is there room for one more question, or should we let everyone go?
I think that one question from Larry Baker about 3D printing.
Yes, great. Okay, I'm going to read out Larry's question, and then that'll be the last one for the night. I'm finding, okay, Larry says, instead of slip casting for molds, have you considered a digital printer that uses clay?
Oh yeah, definitely considered it. And I'm looking forward to either setting up my own or using one at another facility. I believe there was one set up here at some point in the past. Unha Peck, who was also a resident here and a faculty member, has some experience with that. And I believe it was very finicky, the one that was here. And they are finicky in general. But I am super interested in using one, setting up one up, or going someplace where there is one. And I already have projects planned for use of that printer. So if anybody's got a setup and wants me there to use it, I have already projects that I want to do on that kind of a printer. So stay in touch if anybody, you know.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being such a wonderful resident artist, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. If anyone has burning questions that they didn't get to ask Kelly, you can email us at Greenwich House Pottery, and we'll make sure he gets those questions. Or if you're a student at the Pottery, you should stop by Kelly studio while he's there and ask him your questions. But yes, thanks again. I hope everyone has a good evening. And if you want to see the recording of this, I will hopefully have it posted in just a few days on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back and re-listen to anything that you think you missed. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.